Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. I'm your host, Victor, and on this podcast, we're going week to week, watching one of your streaming favorites, providing some context, some conversation along the way. In today's episode, finally, by the way, first of all, a slew of episodes, as loyal listeners will notice, coming back from vacation and with shows wrapping up. So many different shows we were covering here, and just so many things that are out in release right now. Finally catching up with one of the main shows we'll be covering for the next couple of months, Your Friends and Neighbors. Sona is joining me for this conversation, as she usually does, or has for the entire run of this show through season 1 and now into season 2. We actually recorded this in a marathon session covering the finale of DTF St. Louis back on Monday, but finally getting around to recording this follow-up, or I should say publishing it, considering the backlog of other episodes we needed to publish. But we will be covering it on Fridays from now on, so expect to see it in your feed sometime on Fridays through the run of the show. Upcoming on the podcast, The Pit, of course, is wrapping up this week, and expect a conversation with Kim that I'll be having discussing the finale and how that sets up season 3 and general opinions on that season as we wrap up. And of course, Darren and I continue to discuss Euphoria and many other season shows premiering throughout April and into May, along with our Euphoria conversations, and of course, Your Friends and Neighbors. And then in the future, in June, we'll be talking about the new Cape Fear adaptation on Apple TV+. We'll be talking about Lucky, another Las Vegas set crime thriller starring Anya Taylor-Joy, also from the same creator as Your Friends and Neighbors. And of course, so many releases along the way between then and now. Beef coming back for season 2, one of my favorite miniseries of the past few years, season 1 of Beef, and now with a completely new cast returning to Netflix this very week for a season 2. Definitely expect to hear conversation regarding that show. Premiering next week, Richard Gadd's follow-up to his sleeper blockbuster miniseries success of Baby Reindeer, another miniseries, this one on HBO Max, called Half Man, which will be running week to week. So somewhere along the way, I will be covering all of these topics. And one place that some of this information, some of these episodes might turn up is on our Patreon, which I'm not officially announcing yet, but I do want to plant that seed that sometime this week in one of the subsequent episodes, do expect to hear about the launch of the Patreon. I'm just loading some content on there, so there's something there when you guys all go and visit. One thing you would definitely expect to see there will be my conversation with Alan about Memento, about Insomnia, the third Christopher Nolan film. So if you have been listening to our filmography rewatch of Christopher Nolan's films, those conversations will continue there, but many other things as well. There's so many shows that come out that I don't actually finish, so maybe just my opinions on some pilot episodes, some rewatches of other shows. It looks like maybe The Sopranos will be that rewatch of some classic TV there. More recommendations thematically linked to things we're watching. So a lot more content there on the Patreon, all to come, and there'll be a lot more information. I've been trying to put a call to action on each one of these episodes and keep it very succinct. Perhaps I've already passed that point of any succinctness. But here is another tip for you all. If you are a Patreon, or if you plan to be a Patreon, or if you happen to want to be one of our Patreons, we'd love to, of course, have you as a Patreon. But a general tip for any of your Patreon or any similar subscriptions, and that is, of course, there's a lot of convenience, like the magic of the App Store for both Apple, but also Google, which not as unified a platform, of course, for the Google App Stores. But the convenience, of course, of having this as a seamless and integrated platform is great in many ways, especially to the end user. However, the App Store also takes a huge chunk, especially the Apple one, although Google as well takes a cut of the profits from any kind of subscription that you make through the App Store. So for example, you may notice that some streamers allow you to subscribe through the Apple App Store, but Netflix, for example, does not, because Apple takes a 30% cut of any subscriptions through the platform, which they've been sued about this, and I think it's There's again, incredible power to the Apple ecosystem, but this is pretty severe, a 30% haircut. So all that is to say that, sure, install the Patreon app and stream your shows if you are a patron there on those apps. However, in the same way that Netflix makes you go to a browser to subscribe to their services, do the same thing. If you subscribe to someone's Patreon and you're paying them $5 a month and you do it through a browser, the full $5 minus the cut that the Patreon platform takes goes to the creator. But if you go through the App Store, there's a 30% haircut on the $5. So now it's $3.50. And then on top of that, the cut that Patreon takes itself to maintain its platform, which then at that point, less than $3 or so is going to the actual creator. So quite a difference, a 30% differential across the board. So that's my tip for you. Make sure you subscribe through a browser to any patron or any subscription if you're paying for a Substack, for example. Or, of course, Apple Podcasts also have their own subscription services, and subscribing through Apple Podcasts also takes there's a lot of overhead there. So if you want to maximize the amount of money that is going to creators that you're supporting, don't subscribe through the apps themselves. And this goes for Google as well, by the way. Same caveat there. It's a lower percentage that they take. But nonetheless, if you want to maximize the amount of money that goes to the creators, subscribe or renew your subscription through a browser. It sounds silly, right? You're just going through a browser to do the same exact thing and the money's the same, right? It's not. So just so you know. And of course, if you choose to subscribe to our Patreon and donate, we'd love that. I'd love to be able to reimburse our co-hosts, for example, for their time. Okay, so expect that announcement in the very near future. I'll be loading up some content for the Patreon, and I'll let you know when it's available. And with that out of the way, let's get into my conversation with Sona discussing the second episode of Your Friends and Neighbors. Hello, Sona.
Hi, how are you?
Long time no talk.
That's right.
We are not publishing these all at the same time, but just recorded a conversation about the season finale of DTF St. Louis. I'll also be getting Darren's reaction to that season finale, as well as discussing Euphoria. That's already in the feed, actually, because this will be publishing afterwards. And then going forward, we will be covering this show on Fridays through the rest of its run. Oh, and Sona, by the way, I don't know if I've suggested this to you already, but just so you know, the very week that this season of Your Friends and Neighbors wraps up, we have a premiere on Apple TV. Do you know what our next series is going to be? Do you happen to know by chance?
Tell me.
Cape Fear, a new adaptation starring Amy Adams and the psychopath of the Robert De Niro version, if you want to look at the Martin Scorsese version from 1990, is played by Javier Bardem. So
I don't know if you remember, but you and I actually saw that in the movie theater together.
We did, really? Wow, I did not remember that. Wow.
I think there were other people with us, but you and I were both there.
We were present. Yeah, we did see quite a few movies in the early 90s together, for sure. That was the same year as Silence of the Lambs, and both of those psychopaths were nominated for Best Actor, although Anthony Hopkins, of course, won. I did not see Silence of the Lambs with you, not at that time, but I probably did watch it at some point in the future because I watched that many times on
Yes, TV. I know you're a big fan of that movie.
I remember when McDonald's had a bunch of movies that you could get with your meals. They had a bunch of VHS tapes you could get. And I remember getting the Silence of the Lambs as my happy meal or unhappy meal, I guess.
Wow, that is a bizarre tie-in, but okay.
And yeah, I know, right? The McDonald's tie-in. I mean, it wasn't like Silence of the Lambs was the only thing, which would be a very funny tie-in, right? Like what is in these burgers made out of liver with some fava beans. But they also had like Dances with Wolves, which I think I also had Dances with Wolves. Not because I was a huge fan of that film, but just because it was like the most appealing thing on that list. But maybe I got Goodfellas as well. Anyway, a lot of good films in that time period. And speaking of Scorsese, of course, his follow-up to the massive hit of Goodfellas was an even bigger hit with Cape Fear. Anyway, we'll be covering the new version of Cape Fear here on the podcast. When this show wraps up, Sona, how did you like Lady Parts? How did you like the second episode of the show?
I really disliked it until the last 2 minutes.
So my wife watched the first 15 minutes or so of episode 1 with me, and she was like, wow, that's not good. And I kind of agreed with that. I rewatched episode 1 with her yesterday. We watched episode 1 and 2 while my daughter was having a play date here in the house, but it allowed us to sit down and watch an adult show together. And we watched the first 2 episodes, and I disliked episode 1 even more. I had only watched half of episode 2 when it first premiered because we were on vacation, and I'd only watched the first half, and I fell asleep in the middle of it. I just was not that interested in the episode of the show. Did enjoy it a little bit more in the rewatch. And of course, the back half of the episode has a couple of more interesting points. However, to your point, yes, was not a huge fan, but very curious as to where things go from this moment on. And so we're just going to, if anybody's listening to this for general opinions, we're just going to spoil it and maybe work from the back because that's the most intriguing aspect of this. It's the fact that kind of what we knew going into this season of the show, James Marsden's character, Ash, has now discovered that Coop is this cat burglar. And then the question, of course, becomes what is their dynamic going to be going forward? And we've already had the seed planted with last episode that Ash seems to have a interest in people. He may be a criminal himself. He has some kind of criminal background, but we don't fully know yet, and seems to gravitate towards people who are the black sheep, Sam, for example. So he has already started to ingratiate himself with her. And of course, the question very much here is he attracted to these people, the criminal element, the danger of the lives that these people are leading, or is just how he manipulates people is by getting in with people who he sees some kind of weakness with. And that, as a setup for a season, which feels like it hasn't even gotten going yet, is pretty intriguing.
Well, to be honest, I did not have the negative reaction you had to the first episode. I didn't think it was stellar, but I wasn't negatively impacted by it, even though there were a couple of scenes I didn't love. This second episode, on the other hand, I felt like, I don't know if we're going to be able to finish this season in parts. And then in the last 2 minutes, I felt like maybe James Marsden has come to save this show from itself, because that seems to me right now, I'm feeling particularly negative, to be the only way that we can continue is if this James Marsden's character, if Ash's involvement makes this all a lot more interesting and exciting, because I think this show could have so many interesting things to say.
Sure.
And it kind of did in the first season. And we're very early in the second season. But it just seems not interested in saying most of those things, which is disappointing to me.
I completely agree. We were talking about this, my wife and I, yesterday, on all these points, which is that, like you mentioned, there are interesting themes here. The seduction, Coop himself, this unexplored character, not exploring his own morality and his own belief systems, that he is simultaneously despises the people he surrounds himself with, and yet is constantly measuring himself to them, constantly trying to prove himself to them, and that is a metaphor for the culture we live in at large. And, we, of course, are attracted to these big, shiny baubles, and simultaneously aware that we are not happy achieving them, having them, and we know that, and yet we can't help ourselves. We are compelled to pursue them nonetheless. And that's something about the culture at large, is something about us as human beings, that thing, that double-edged sword of that love-hate relationship we have with a lot of things we're attracted to. All that is really interesting, an interesting way to approach it here. I, in general, by the way, like a heist film. I like seeing people taken down a peg, and we discussed it in season 1. We didn't really do a great job. I mean, they did not do a really great job of fully fleshing that out, but I still love the premise so much. I thought it worked. And the fact that they didn't fully work out that aspect that I just outlined there, but simultaneously they were showing the draw of Coop back to his family, of wanting to have the simpler life and trying to repair the family unit. I think that resonated, even though it seemed very psychotic, that he seems to be wanting to rebuild his relationship with his family and then doing all these really dangerous activities that could completely derail any relationship with his family and ruin their actual financial stability. They didn't really explore that, but nonetheless, it was juggling all those things in some kind of an interesting way. To your point here with season 2, even though I love that the Marsden character has an opportunity to, like you said, save the show and make it say something, like force, I should say, Coop to ask himself, what is he about, right? If he's not like the Marsden character, if there's going to be some kind of foil there, then what is he doing? Why is he doing this? Questioning himself in ways that he really has not been able to. I mean, literally, this was very irritating to me in episode 1, by the way, Sona, was the fact that when Barney asks him, why are you doing this? He's like, I don't know. That's not, you gotta have a reason at this point. You really cannot just almost throw your life away every single week for $100,000 and or less when you sell it on the black market and not ask yourself, why are you doing this to yourself? Especially when you're like, I need to have $2 million homes or multi-million-dollar homes.
Right.
I'm like, if you really believe that, then what the hell are you doing?
Right. And, if you're going to be self-destructive, then just go for it and blow it all up and go live on an island someplace. Right. But this weird middle ground is very hard to understand.
Yeah. I mean, there's a version of this where it's uncut gems, but at a more realistic level where he knows that, in other words, the thrill is the fact that he can lose it all at any moment, right? Mm-hmm. That's a version of this and a psychology that I can understand. This psychology is that he is just in some kind of arrested development and he's just stuck in something. He's trying to work something out and he's not even asking himself what that is. And it's honestly frustrating to watch. However, all that being said, maybe the Marsden character is here to put a point on all of that and force him to make some decisions. So I do hope that that's where things are going.
And the other thing I want to say that we will certainly get to is someone in that writer's room has really terribly overestimated our interest in these children.
Okay, yes. So that's the other thing that my wife and I were discussing yesterday, exactly that point. That even though we're very excited, honestly, very excited to see what they're going to do with the Marsden character, my concern, even based on season 1, is that there were moments in season 1 where Coop might go to jail for the rest of his life. Now, let's spend the next episode where we have to figure out whether Coop is going to jail for the rest of his life or not. Let's go get high and hang out and party in New York City, everybody. Mm-hmm. And the fact the show was like thinking that we as viewers were equally interested in those things was bizarre. And my wife and I, and I'm sure from what you just said, you as well, are very concerned about the fact that it could very well be that the Marsden stakes and that storyline could be very compelling. And yet we're still going to have at least half of each episode allocated to Barney and his impending fatherhood, to Mel and her menopause, to the kids and their romantic relationships. Do we really want to have the show juggling these things? Because as I mentioned in season 1, it had a lot of the same flaws, but the family dynamic actually somehow, intentionally or not, seemed to be tying into the broader theme of what is he doing and this is what's at risk. And now it's just like, no, we're just going to have these parallel storylines, I think. And once again, the season's just getting going now, officially after episode 2. Maybe this is when things actually start to gel. But I have very serious concerns that we are supposed to be equally vested in these things. And I'm sorry that the crime show that this show seems to be uninterested in being is by far the most compelling aspect of the show. And we do not care as much about Mel's menopause symptoms.
I actually don't mind the menopause. Obviously, there's a point of personal connection there. I don't mind.
With my wife as well, by the way.
I don't mind the stuff with Barney. I think he's a likable character. I'm interested in him. I don't understand, and I guess this is something I could have Googled, what is the demographic of viewers of this show? Because unless it's very popular amongst 14 and 15-year-olds, I don't get why we're spending this time here.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's the worst of it for sure. And also the worst written characters, I think, on the show. Maybe not the son so much. The daughter is definitely not very well written. And not very
the son in his headphones, I'm sick of it.
So yeah, I agree with that. Like, why do we need to have that? And I like you, to your point, I do not think teenagers are watching the show at all. But even with the menopause themes, I actually don't mind them introducing this because it is all part of that middle age ennui that we're talking about here. That is not my broader point. It's just the way the scripts are actually balanced in the past. Again, maybe I'll be proven wrong here, but I just think about even in this particular episode, I mean, this specific episode I find concerning in this very regard. It's called Lady Parts. We have all these different parts for ladies to play. Plus, of course, we have the lady parts, Mel's lady parts. So we have all that going on. And then bookended, we have Barney in on the operation and what's going on there and his money laundering and how that doesn't work out. And some comedy there. I love the guy that they try to hook up with is currently under house arrest. So maybe not the best guy to be talking to about your criminal endeavors. So all of that is very funny. And then bookended, of course, at the end with, no pun intended, because, he steals a book, the Edith Wharton book, House of Mirth, right? Not Age of Innocence, but House of Mirth, whatever. Anyway, so he steals that book in the bookend to the episode. And then, of course, James Marsden shows up and dun, dun, he's been found out, right? That's the bookends of the show. And then in the middle, we have Sam and her son wasn't invited to the party. And
oh my gosh. You don't even get me started on that. I was happy at least they had somebody say out loud what we're all thinking is that, yeah, I do feel bad for Sam's kids. It is hurtful that he wasn't invited to the party. Also, it is no small thing to frame someone for murder.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
so exactly. Don't be shocked. That would make you a pariah.
I read a defense of this on the internet today that I thought was irritating to me, honestly, which was the fact that did you notice on the show that like Coop is back in with the boys and all the guys walk away and, Marsden's character, we don't know his backstory yet, but Ash has been arrested for something in the past and now he's a billionaire or, the richest guy in the neighborhood, or at least presents that way. So maybe he could be a con man, who knows for sure. But all this failing upwards, right, of these, and Sam and all the women, they're the ones who are put upon and they're the ones who, if things go really badly, it's Bernard, right? Bernard's wife who could potentially be stuck taking care of the kids when he's now embroiled in this criminal conspiracy as well.
Barney.
Barney. Mm-hmm. And you have Coop, of course. And so the women are all put upon, and even Sam, look at her. They specifically call out, even Sam, look, she doesn't have to. I'm like, all right, people, you're taking this way too far because Sam is no victim here. The thing she did, don't get me wrong, Coop, like she does not know what Coop does, right? So if she knew, then it could be like, well, screw you, man. You tried to steal from me. That's why you were in my house. I'm going to frame you for a murder. There's one version of that. She does not know this. She is purely framing him because she wants the insurance payout and he's the convenient target. So yeah, that is like despicable behavior. And that is the perception that everyone has of her. And they're just supposed to just be okay with her all of a sudden. What are you talking about? If you're trying to make her some kind of martyr, the show is completely identifying our sympathy there by a mile. That she now is in desperate circumstances and that now Ash can, use that. And my wife brought up the fact, like, why, she literally says, why is Sam still living in this town? She needs to get away from this town.
Absolutely true.
But I understand. I defended that slight decision in the fact that, she is a real estate agent. She's actually a real estate agent so she can sell that house that nobody wants to buy because somebody died in it recently. So she's kind of trapped in that house until she can sell it. Okay. And her her son, I should say, has his social network. So I understand a little bit of that. She doesn't have that much means. But my question, and I don't know if you can provide any insight into this at all, Sona, but how would she how does she get the proceeds of that house at all after what she's done?
Why wouldn't she be able to?
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, I actually don't know. I haven't actually reasoned it out that far. It's just the fact that, so she committed a crime. She did not kill her husband. So obviously she could not get the funds if she had killed her husband. She committed insurance fraud by trying to make it look like a murder, but that just means she will not get the payout from the insurance.
Right.
She went to jail, but only because what did they call it when you do something to a body after it's dead?
She tampered with the body.
Tampered with the body, yeah. So it's just a tamper with the body situation. The frame up for murder, what is that? What would that be called from a legal perspective? If you frame somebody for a murder, that seems like a pretty serious crime.
What a good question. I am sure that must be a criminal violation, but
conspiracy to conspire?
It was a conspiracy with one, though.
Yes, good point. Yeah.
But I'm sure it is something. But they made a comment, right, in the first episode saying she had bargained everything down to misdemeanors or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, if you want to say that, she's the put upon person, the fact that she is wealthy and she didn't go to jail for a very long time speaks to the fact that she or didn't bankrupt herself in legal fees so that she has to sell all her assets just to be able to pay them off.
Hey, AI says framing someone for a crime involves illegal acts like false reporting to law enforcement, obstruction of justice, perjury, and fabricating evidence.
Yes. So there you go. And especially framing someone for a murder. If you're trying to frame somebody for...
Not just ending crime.
Yeah. Stealing money from you, let's say that you're trying to sue somebody and you falsify the theft so that you can claim the money, that's pretty bad. But throwing somebody under the bus for a murder, it seems to be a very severe case, which of course she has gotten away with. So yeah, no much sympathy for Sam. And this conversation, and even the way that it seems to be the tone of the show is sympathetic to Sam.
Agree. It's kind of upsetting.
When she drives away and you see her former friend, sitting there with that expression on her face of kind of she's been stung a little bit by the words, yeah, I was really bad to her. What are you talking about? She framed somebody for murder. That's not forgivable.
Yeah.
That is not forgivable. She needs to make significant amends before there's any thought of patching things up. It's crazy.
I guess the idea is, you shouldn't penalize the children for
that one.
Parents'
I am empathetic to that
mistakes, which is valid, but also awkward, right? To say, especially at that age, that wasn't a drop-off party, what we saw.
Right.
So it's not like you could say, hey, I'm inviting your kid because I don't hold what you did against him. I don't have to spend time with you anyway. This was like a party for families, it seemed. So then how can you say your kid's invited, but you can't come because what you did was awful? That's very awkward. I don't blame the friend.
I think it's an awkward thing to say. But I think that the show itself, by the way, when she said, well, if you had done that, at least you would have only been a slightly shitty person, I think the show has the same opinion, which is crazy because I think best case scenario, you would have called her or texted her more likely. The very awkward call of just being there's a birthday party this weekend. He wants his best friend to be here, obviously. So please, but you cannot come to this party. And I know it's an awkward thing to say, but that is the best case scenario. And I think the show's opinion is that it would be slightly shitty to do that. And what are you talking about? That is not slightly shitty. That is you have to be a very big person to have the conversation you just described.
Yeah.
And it would not be shitty at all. It'd be the best. Everyone would see you as a hero if that was the decision you made. And I don't think the show has that opinion of it, which is bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. I also like the fact that she says, well, I could have had someone else drop him off. I'm like, who? Nobody in this town is going to talk to her.
Right. Maybe she could have hired a sitter, I guess.
Yeah, possibly. Yes, hire somebody to take him. That's a good point. And she probably has a sitter that she has some relationship with, so she can talk to. So yeah, that's a good point. But man, that whole scene, crazy. And of course, let's talk about Mel's lady part as well. I thought it was a little strained last week. Not as bad as this one, though. You liked the locker room conversation with the guys last week. What did you think of the ladies' locker room conversation this week?
Well, the biggest struggle that I had was I don't know any of these women well enough. Yeah. So they're all there in their identical towels and whatever. And I couldn't barely make out who was who or where I knew them from in trying to figure out from context cues who the characters were. So I found that fairly distracting. And this is an interesting point that you make of the contrast between the first episode and the second episode. This just didn't work for me.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, I thought it was a little strained with the guys, but it still felt somewhat believable. I know you liked it more than I did, but still, it didn't rub me the wrong way. I'm like, we've seen scenes like that on the show before too. But I wanted to get your opinion of this one because I was like, this is not a good scene. And to your point, it really does want you to be like, yeah, they all know each other. And like you said, I'm watching them. I literally rewound a couple of times to see who was speaking the lines of dialogue.
Exactly.
And I'm like, am I supposed to know who she is? I don't know who that is.
Exactly.
It's literally just these women who have been around, in the before. And some of them are people who, like the lawyer who was blackmailed last season. So some of them are people we have seen in more.
I don't doubt that. Yeah. But I still had a hard time figuring it out in the moment.
Oh, for most of them, I don't know them. And if they have been, it's like literally like they're just having brunch together. So that's about as much as I have cared about these characters in the past. I guess it's a lot of the women who were talking around Mel last week around that table before the Marsden character Ash showed up.
Right.
So I think that's probably the same women, but again,
agree.
Who are they? They have nothing to differentiate them from each other. And then we have, of course, the kids, this whole meeting at the pool. I am intrigued a little bit out of this, not of the whole drama of, oh man, who, his ex-girlfriend or girlfriend, I guess they're still dating. She doesn't know that they're broken up. And now he's making dates with this other girl, with Ash's daughter. I'm curious that Ash's daughter could provide a different perspective on the Ash character. Purely, I'm intrigued by that. I don't want to spend this much time figuring out what's happening, like these whole scenes that are taking place exclusively in the high school. Why are we having scenes in the high school for a show, to your point, where the median age of this show is probably 55 years old who are watching this show? And then we have all these high school scenes. What is going on?
Yeah, totally agree. I could see the daughter, Ash's daughter, being useful. I don't know if that's the right word, interesting, as far as it enlightens us as to Ash's life, what happened with her mother, right? Because we know that she's passed away, but we don't know how, why, when. I think we do know when, but not how or why. So there is a purpose to having her here, but I hope it's not as part of a love triangle.
I hope not. I mean, oh boy, do we want to see a teen love triangle? I mean, this is Dawson's Creek.
We do not.
We want to see Dawson's Creek now? I don't think that's the one. Not me personally. Of course, Mel's perimenopause is really big, but more importantly, it's that Mel is losing. I think this is what the perimenopause is a metaphor for, but also is thematically about being in middle age. Ironically, we were just talking about DTF. Those people are in a very different financial situation than these folks here, of course. But again, this whole idea that you start losing control of your life in your middle age. So Mel has lost control of her narrative. She doesn't know what she wants. She doesn't have a career. She thinks she's a writer, but she's not. Her body's betraying her. She has a dog pooping on her lawn. Her daughter doesn't want to go to Princeton. This is what.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that scene?
Let's talk about all of that. Yes. Yeah, that's really rough. I agree. Go ahead. Yes, I definitely want to talk about that scene. But the reason I was bringing up all that stuff is, what is the purpose beyond, of course, maybe being too focused on the teens? What is the purpose of this storyline? But I think that's probably what you're about to get into. So
of the Princeton storyline?
The Princeton thing. Yeah, like exactly. Like why? Yes, go ahead.
Gosh, the purpose might be something of drawing some kind of parallel to trying to figure yourself out and the struggles that Mel is having and maybe even the Coop is having. I don't know. I'm speculating on this off the cuff.
Sure.
Because the scene was so annoying that
Yes.
I really didn't think about it past being annoyed with it. First of all, why did it go on for so long?
Yep.
So long. Second of all, I know this is a show about privileged people that take for granted what they have, but being from the area this show is in, takes place in the New York City metropolitan area, and having some insight into what the culture is like. First of all, it is nearly impossible to get into Princeton. I know
Right.
both her parents went there, whatever. And that's basically the way you get in, from what I understand around here. To give up that opportunity is very, very short-sighted. You can figure out who you are while you're in college or after college. Second, she had no plan whatsoever.
Right.
If you're going to say no to going to Princeton, where almost nobody gets in, you have to have a plan. You can't just say, I don't know what I want to do, but I don't want to go to Princeton. And I think this girl is smart enough to understand that about life and her parents and presenting options, right? That is just a failure to read the room from a character that we've not been told is that clueless. I can't begin to say how annoying I found all of this. What did you think about it?
Yes. So first of all, yes, very irritating. And especially the fact that this is totally unexamined. I'll defend it slightly in the fact that her dad also seems to not have examined his decisions either. So Tori maybe is just the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree. I honestly think that I'm giving the show too much credit in even thinking about that, given how poorly I think a lot of these things are written on the show. I mean, my personal opinion. And I think the key takeaway of this episode and of her decision is her saying, Tori, that your lives didn't work out, right? So basically saying that you guys did all the things. You went to Princeton, you had the family, you supposedly present yourselves as what the ideal I'm supposed to aspire to, and it didn't work out for you guys, right? So that's her like revenge here. But to your point, like I knew people who got into Ivy League schools and then decided they didn't want that or weren't sure about what they wanted to do. To your point, they took a year off and they traveled. They went to community college and then still, put themselves on the waiting list at the, school that they were accepted to. And then in year 2 or something, they went and finally attended that college. So the fact that Tori's just like, I don't think I'm going to go to college. I don't think I'm going to do anything. It just seems, and maybe it's because she's a spoiled brat and she just thinks someone's going to take care of her forever. But that's the thing is, I don't think, again, the show seems to be writing these characters in a way that is contradictory to what our expectation is. In the same way that I think we're supposed to empathize with Sam and you're like, are you crazy? It's the same thing here, where for her to have this conversation with her parents at the surprise party to only find out that she has no plan at all just makes her seem like a spoiled brat, because it's like, here's all this opportunity you have and you don't plan to do anything with it. You just want to just drop out. So what? So that the people that you're like rebelling against have to support you. How does that prove anything? Right.
First of all, it was obnoxious for her parents to log on to the thing. Yes. I get that. That was obnoxious. But and maybe this is big talk on my part, right? Because my kid is 9 years old. So we are a little bit away from this. I think if he did something like this, I would say, well, where do you plan to live and how do you plan to support yourself? Because it's not going to be here.
Right. Yeah. If you're just going to drop out and you're not going to be on the plan.
With no plan. Yeah.
That is actually fine. You know what? There are plenty of people who did exactly that. They're like, I could have gone to an Ivy League school and now they're billionaires, but they made their own way, but they had a plan, right? You can't just be like, I'm going to live in the basement and do nothing but not go to college either. Well, until you have a plan, you're going to college.
Exactly.
I make the plan for you.
Go try it. Maybe you'll like it.
Exactly. So yeah, at least guess what? Even if you don't do great, at least it's an experience. And sitting in the basement while your friends all leave and you're alone is not going to cut it. So yeah, the whole thing was very irritating. And of course, resonates with us since we have, not our own children, but we have friends, plenty of friends who have children in this age group. And it's like, yeah, so what is the plan, right? It's very frustrating.
And then the kicker on the whole thing is Coop saying, maybe she's right.
Maybe she's right. Sure. Maybe she'll join his criminal enterprise as well.
Exactly. Maybe he's like, I'm looking to expand.
I might have to expand given the situation. I got so many mouths to feed.
Speaking of expanding, what's up with Barney saying that Coop was his biggest client when he's got this guy Nick, who's building gyms and expanding gyms? I don't even understand how this makes mathematical sense.
Oh my God. The math is not mathing so bad on this show. I'm so glad you brought this up, Sona. I had an epiphany watching this show yesterday, and me and my wife went on a jag for at least half an hour about how absolutely preposterous this particular aspect is. Okay. Here's my epiphany that got our derailed conversation for half an hour, and it may happen again right now. Here is the epiphany I just made, and I should have made last season. Unless I missed something, Sona, I have this giant question. How does a guy who manages a hedge fund need somebody to manage his money? What are you talking about? And I'm not talking about now. Now, of course, maybe he would need to go to Barney and say, hey, can you help me out with this, right? That makes sense. But Barney was his money manager before. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? And to your point, exactly the follow-up point we had, not only is that ridiculous that he's giving Barney like what? If Barney's going to be like, hey, I'll manage your money. And I'm like, okay, fine. I need a different set of eyes on this. Fine. But Barney can't be charging him 5% or 10%, considering he already has a hedge fund. I mean, this is what he does all day long, is hedging money for millionaires. Why would he need someone? He could just put his money in his hedge fund. What are you talking about? And so that's preposterous. But then that Barney's doing this, Barney would have to be getting like a 1% or something on this. And that's the most, you hit the nail right on the head. Then when we're doing that logic, and Barney's in the midst of building a house that's bigger than Coop's house. And where is he getting all this money from? Getting 1% of what he makes when he only has a handful of clients. And he says Coop is his biggest client. And that's the most ridiculous thing of all. This guy's got gyms. This guy is a host on ESPN. He is a famous basketball player. I'm sure he makes, theoretically, in the real world, he would make millions, if not $10 million a year just in leftover promotional, what do you call it? Deals, like these deals that athletes have with sponsorships. So he makes probably millions of dollars a year just on sponsorships. And if Barney is getting a percentage of that, he's making tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars just off of that guy. We're supposed to believe he was making more money managing Coop's money. So, and if that's true, then that means that Coop was bringing in what, 10, $20 million a year in this hedge fund, and he's replacing it selling Mont Blanc pens? What are you talking about? This math is not mathing. None of this makes any goddamn sense at all. Yes, we got so irritated with the show just thinking about, are they even cross-referencing their own logic in this show? It's preposterous. And then if we go the other way and we're like, okay, no, he's like saying, Coop, you have to replace your previous salary, which is like $1 million. He literally says this. You need to bring in over $1 million a year, plus what the extra percentage to launder it. And I'm like, okay, so you're getting a percent on this guy's $1 million a year salary. How is he able to maintain his $1 million a year lifestyle, taking a percent of another guy who's making $1 million a year when he's his biggest client? And then, like you said, how are these other guys not way richer than Coop? They should be making way more money than Coop is making. That's preposterous. Oh, God. That whole rabbit hole is just bananas.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's take this all at however we're supposed to believe this. So Barney is correct, especially with these additional people, that Coop is probably is going to be struggling to pay any of these bills if he's only covering half of his bills right now with his current criminal enterprise. At least we get a little clarity versus some of the questions we had last week. They're saying that they hit 14 jobs in the past year in the county. So I guess the Whisper network of maids who don't just work in this one neighborhood, they have been moving around. So,
I agree. That was a helpful bit of clarity that it's now a countywide operation. Yes.
Right. And now that makes a little more sense, that you can imagine like friends of friends, or a party got invited to, or somebody hears about, or a job that the cousin, I think it's a cousin, right? Elena's cousin is doing these installations for security cameras. So you can imagine that they're like, there's a new house that just got built out. We're currently installing the security cameras. Here's your opportunity to get in there. And it's not related to this one. So nobody's on high alert. There's a cat burglar in the neighborhood. So none of that makes a lot more sense. So at least we get that. And of course, now, of course, he not only has to subsidize Barney as well to help him pay his bills. So now he's got to double what he's making probably. And if he's going to launder it, he has to make more than twice as much. But of course, now Ash is now in the mix as well. And what is Ash's side going to be? I'm very curious to see that, by the way. Is Ash going to push him into, for example, making the show what we thought it should have been from the beginning? If Ash is the type of guy who uses people's information against them, then maybe he's telling Coop everything we've said before. You're really missing the opportunity of what you're doing, right? So hopefully Ash is here as a character, like you said, to save the show from itself, and maybe save Coop from himself as well. It all remains to be seen. So, so many head-scratching decisions in this episode of television. Anything else we need to touch on?
I did think it was a cute scene where Coop was trying to help the fences front desk guy, essentially, with his finances.
Yes, that was fun. Yeah, that was good.
That's something good I can say. Yeah. I liked that. I thought the bouquet of flowers that Ash brought was beautiful. Looking for good things to say.
I mean, I will say that I like every time Marsden's on screen. I think all the scenes work. I was calling this out to my wife when we were rewatching episode 1, that there are certain shows, and a lot of writers are like this. There are certain writers that write characters. Each character very much has their own voice. And then there are certain characters, like Tarantino is like this, where all the characters talk in the exact same voice. Kevin Smith, another one of these characters, right? Everybody talks like Kevin Smith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like with Tarantino,
ironically didn't talk in his own movies, but yes, go ahead.
Right. And then Tarantino, for example, as an example of this, Tarantino casts really well. So even though everybody's talking in this very heightened, very hyper pop culture reference dialogue, they differentiate each other because he hires incredibly skilled actors, not only skilled actors, but people who are really good at reading his dialogue, right? And it was especially glaring last week seeing Tori, the daughter, trying to speak in this tone that like her dad and like all the other characters in the show, that really felt difficult. And it really made me appreciate Marsden. By the way, we watched Marsden on Paradise. We just recently, we watched him in that show, that movie he made last week. We can't remember the name of it. Alice, Mike, and Nick, I think it was called. That just premiered on Hulu a couple weeks ago. Science fiction film, very fun, gangster / time travel thriller action movie, and comedy as well. So anyway, just seen him a bunch of times in the past couple of weeks. So again, thinking about Marsden very much so, as it's having this big moment currently being in so many things. But it made me think about how his scenes work and no one else's scenes work, because he has to deliver that same dialogue, but it feels like he is coming up with that in the moment, in the way that some of these characters really are struggling to make these scenes work at all. And it's very uneven. These performances are very uneven. John Hamm, I think as well, when Hamm and Marsden are together on screen, I don't think that Coop as a character works all the time. But again, this is what gives me some hope for this show. They are very good together. And that dynamic could be very interesting. What is driving Coop? Why did he go and steal from Ash in that moment after they had that initial conversation? Ash, in a way, is everything that Coop hates, but seems to wear it so lightly. If he is, I mean, this is if we buy that Coop actually is sick with this kind of status-seeking lifestyle, if that is actually true, then there is something that probably antagonizes him about somebody who is not troubled by his own lifestyle, like Ash is. So,
and on that subject, I will say the breakfast buffet scene with
yes, exactly.
and Ash was fun. That was a good one.
That's an example of where they're on screen together and the show works. So my concern again is that now we have a moment of, transparency between the two of them where they can have this awkward buddy interaction from this point on, and it could be intriguing. But I do worry that just like last season, we'll have half the episode will be this, which is like the compelling part of it. And then the other half will be like, Coop's got to help Tori get back into Princeton now that she blew her chances, and like now he's got to blackmail somebody to get her, to get her in some back door or something. And I'm like, I don't care. Don't care. And that, unfortunately, is going to be the balancing act this show has got to figure out. All right, a couple more things I wanted to bring up. Of course, Coop, first of all, they're listening to he's listening to the Blank Check podcast at one point. So an interesting, podcast reference here on the show, a very popular movie podcast. But he, of course, is a big movie fan, as we know from season 1.
Yeah.
Seeing him in movie theaters, watching these movies from the 50s, of course, is a direct callback to Mad Men and many scenes of him in the theater. And of course, watching old films, because those at the time, they're films of the era. And in this case, he's watching old films. But what movies do we have references here? Because I always think when you talk about, if you use music on the soundtrack, or if you have a name that has some kind of relevance to it, or if you make another movie reference, that there's a clue potentially as to what the plot of the film is going to be. So and
I think, by the way, that's true of books as well. We've already had a Great Gatsby reference.
Yep.
And also,
House of Mirth.
Right, which I don't know much about. I don't think I ever read it, but again, just chiming in with AI really quickly, and then I'll let you get back to the subject at hand.
Yes.
The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton is a tragic novel detailing the 2-year social descent of Lily Bart, a beautiful but impoverished 29-year-old socialite in 1890s New York. As she fails to secure a wealthy husband to maintain her luxurious lifestyle, she's ruined by gambling debts, gossip, and the cutthroat nature of high society, eventually dying from an overdose.
Exactly. I did not know the outline of House of Mirth, so I'm glad you read it. But I immediately thought of Age of Innocence, which I'm more familiar with. And that also is about performing in high society and someone who is like suffocated by the performance of polite society in this very upper class New York. So I'm like, there you go. The Edith Wharton reference, and it is very important, I think, for sure. And I think in House of Mirth, I mean, I don't know if the gambling thing is going to tie in. Who knows? Maybe there's more resonance there. But I think minimally it is the class struggle aspect to it is definitely a direct reference. But I'm curious about the films that they have referenced here. First of all, the first reference with that incredible scene, by the way, one of the most iconic moments in film, when the fisherman sees the body of that woman in the car in the lake, that is from Night of the Hunter. And in Night of the Hunter, interesting aspect of it is that you have someone who is a preacher who is played by, he was in Cape Fear as well, Robert Mitchum. And Robert Mitchum's character is this preacher who, is seen as this upstanding citizen, but it's the kids, this is where it might be important, the kids know that he murdered this widow for her money, and the Shelley Winters character who's at the bottom of the lake. And he is seen as, no, he's the authority figure. He's obviously, the kids are just being paranoid. And of course, it's like a horror film in many ways about these kids trying to survive and being stalked by this psychotic person who presents themselves as a leader, right? And an honorable person. So maybe there's some element of that. And the second film he watches, I just saw this film this year. And by the way, I recommend this highly for everybody. It's such a great film. The Sweet Smell of Success, which takes place in New York City. That's the one with Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis, and that we see at the end of the film. And that film is one of the best written films I've ever seen in my life. I don't love the end of that film, but I do love everything else about it. But Sona, 1950s New York, shot in black and white, the gleaming cars in the city, the analog light bulb, Times Square. It is like the most astonishingly beautiful view of 1950s New York, just visually so great. But the dialogue, so rat-a-tat, so clever, so sharp, very funny, but also very dark. And what's interesting there, and I think it's maybe going to resonate with this season of the show potentially, is that Tony Curtis is this guy who writes for a newspaper. He's basically a gossip columnist. And the Burt Lancaster character is very wealthy and manipulates him to write the articles he wants to get those people to do what he wants them to do. And the Tony Curtis character repeatedly over the course of the film is, I'm in control of this relationship, but he's not. He's being manipulated the whole entire time by the Burt Lancaster character, who's the more powerful figure. And I think that might be the dynamic we're going to see between the Marsden character and the Coop character, where Coop thinks he's in control, but Marsden's pulling his strings. And then will there be some kind of reversal by the end? So that could be potentially a little clue. All those literary references could be, or cinematic references, I guess. He also assembles the DVD box for the 50th anniversary of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So maybe there's a Chainsaw Massacre at the end of this series as well. Who knows? I definitely would be looking forward to that.
Twist. Ash's murderer.
I would really love to see that. You know, we go full American Psycho by the end of the film, the series. Anyway, some more potential references that are being made there. And Tropper, the writer of this series, Jonathan Tropper, his name is, big movie head. So maybe he is making some hinting at things we might see later in the season. Anyway, I'm intrigued by all of that, but boy, I agree with you, Sona. This was really a rough episode.
Better luck next week, I guess.
I hope so. Have you ever heard about this laser rejuvenation to your vagina? Have you ever heard of this procedure? Is this a real thing or is this made up for the show?
I have definitely heard of vaginal rejuvenation. I have not looked into whether it's done with a laser or some other way.
I have heard those words said before. I just don't know if there was laser surgery involved.
Yeah.
So that seemed a little extreme, to be honest.
I don't know, but she was on board right away with the signing up for that. I feel like I would explore other things before I jump to lasering that
before the lasers
area.
come, exactly. Yeah, especially.
I mean, people do laser hair removal down there, so I guess it's only a couple inches difference.
Perhaps, but I mean, the other one seems a little more intrusive.
Yeah, one is much more superficial.
Yeah, exactly. It's where the laser's going that is concerning.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess maybe we'll find out more about that over the course of this episode as well. I hope not, actually.
I hope not too.
What would you do if your neighbor's pooping all over your neighbor's, not your neighbor, that would be really a whole other can of worms, but the neighbor's dog is pooping all over your lawn. How would you deal with this situation?
So this is a problem I've not had to encounter living in the city. The dogs do go to the bathroom everywhere, but I don't have a lawn. So I feel like if it really bothered me, I would build a fence of some sort.
Good point. Why don't they have more fences?
But these people have money.
For sure. Yeah, why not?
What would you do? You're much more likely to have this issue than I am.
We have put up a fence. We put up a fence because...
For this reason?
Well, you know what? We put up a fence because we were thinking about getting a dog at one point. Now my daughter wants to get a cat. And there's
the fence will still come in handy then.
I guess. I mean, the cats usually go under the fence. But
I'm joking.
It'll keep the dogs out when the cat runs under the fence. That's a good sign. But yes. And there's actually a cat rescue event next week. So I think we're going to surprise my daughter, whose birthday is just less than 2 weeks away.
Well, I know you're a big cat person. So yes, I feel like a cat would make you really happy.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually babysat our family members' cats on multiple occasions. And that's part of the reason that my daughter has been learned to appreciate the cat a little bit more. She wants a kitten, though. So that's a little more. I understand that, because she'll be very cute. Yes. Part of it is the cuteness of it. And of course, the other part of it is, you got a full grown animal. And, they're not going to bond to you the same way as if we literally raise them from a baby. So But we'll see. We'll see how that all goes.
So regardless, you have the fence in place, so you won't have this problem.
True. So we will, that avoids our front yard is not fenced. And occasionally when I'm mowing the lawn, we do find dog turds around. So, but for the most part, people do not let the dogs just run around. And luckily, and
yeah, I mean, it's not only bizarre that that's happening, but that the dog is making it to the backyard is very strange to me.
Yeah, they're just like letting the dog have free reign, which that does not happen at all in our neighborhood, luckily.
You'd think if you care about your dog, you wouldn't do that because a car could come.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was going to say our neighborhood is exactly that situation where if a dog was just roaming the streets, could very well get hit by a car.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing in the neighborhood here on Your Friends and Neighbors. These people all have their homes are relatively close to each other. So there's a lot of cars coming in and out during after school hours, I'm sure, during the, going to work, coming back from work, going to Pilates around lunchtime. I'm sure a lot of the wives are doing that or going to the pool house. So I think that, this is not a good idea to have your dog roam in the neighborhood.
Oh, or maybe I get an electric fence.
Yeah, you can do that too. You could also get a fence. You could get those shock collars for the dogs to keep them on your properties.
Right, but I'm assuming that
these people
I don't have control over the autonomy of the dog. So,
yeah, dog turds are a problem.
Yuck.
I'm sure we will pursue that line of inquiry as well.
Yeah,
she's going to rage out.
Storylines that we've got going, I think that one is not going anywhere.
Well, she does have rage issues, so who knows?
Yeah.
My wife was saying that she's going to take the bag and set it on fire on the front steps. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's where the show goes, to be honest with you. As juvenile as some of these adults act.
Mm.
All right. I guess we will know more next week. So on the podcast, as I mentioned in the previous conversation, we'll be talking about Your Friends and Neighbors. We'll be talking about Euphoria, at least for a couple more weeks. We'll be talking about The Pit, which is wrapping up this week as well. And Sona, have you seen the preview for Margot Has Money Trouble?
Apple keeps showing it to me.
This Elle Fanning having a great year. She just got an Academy Award nomination. She was just in that new Predator film as well. Very entertaining, playing a dual role in that film if you haven't seen it. And so really having a big moment here. And this series played at South by Southwest, I believe it was. And it's been getting rave reviews. So I am curious. I, in general, do not love David E. Kelley. Michelle Pfeiffer in a David E. Kelley series for the first time, and she's supposed to be great in this. So anyway, we will be sampling it on Wednesday. And give it a shot as well. Maybe we will talk about both of these shows in conjunction with each other.
Sure.
Oh, and Beef, Sona. Did you watch Beef?
I watched the first couple of episodes and I didn't get too far into it. I know people loved it though.
I loved Beef, and it's coming back for a second season this week as well. It's like I said, this continues this April of just tons of releases, but yet another busy week here. Yeah, and I loved season 1 of Beef, and season 2 stars Oscar Isaac and Carey Mulligan, so an interesting new cast. But you should watch season 1 of Beef. It's so good. I'm really a big fan of it. And we'll probably discuss it somewhere here on the podcast as well. All right, Sona, again, thank you for all your time today.
Thank you.
And we will talk again on Friday.
Sounds good.
All right,